My name is Emma, and I'm about to tell you how my college roommate, the girl I considered my closest friend and trusted with my most personal information, systematically destroyed my financial future using my own identity. What I thought was the perfect roommate relationship turned out to be a calculated long-term identity theft scheme that nearly cost me my degree, my career prospects, and my sanity. I should have been suspicious when Madison seemed too perfect during our first meeting at the campus housing office. While other potential roommates were awkward or had obvious red flags, Madison was charming, organized, and surprisingly knowledgeable about financial aid, student loans, and campus resources. She even offered to help me navigate the confusing paperwork required for out-of-state students. I went through all this last year as a transfer student, she explained with a warm smile that immediately put me at ease. The financial aid office here is a nightmare, but I know all the shortcuts and which forms you actually need versus which ones are just bureaucratic busy work. As a freshman from a small town in Iowa, I was overwhelmed by everything about college life. Madison seemed like a godsend, a confident, experienced student who was willing to help me avoid the mistakes she'd made during her own transition. "We're going to be great roommates," she said as we signed our housing contract. "I believe in taking care of each other, you know? College is hard enough without having to figure everything out alone." I was so grateful to have found someone who seemed genuinely interested in helping me succeed. For the first few months of our freshman year, Madison was everything I could have hoped for in a roommate. She helped me set up my student email account, showed me how to use the online portal for class registration, and even walked me through the process of applying for work-study jobs on campus. "You'll want to get direct deposit set up for any campus jobs," she advised, pulling up the forms on her laptop. "It's so much easier than waiting for paper checks. Here, let me help you fill this out. I remember all the tricky parts." Madison's helpfulness extended to every aspect of college life. She knew which professors were easy graders, which dining halls had the best food, and which study spots were quietest during exam periods. She even helped me understand my student loan documents when they arrived in the mail. "These forms are so confusing," she said, spreading my financial aid paperwork across her desk. "Let me show you what everything means. You want to make sure you're getting the maximum aid you're eligible for." I was touched by how much time and energy Madison invested in helping me navigate college. She seemed genuinely invested in my success, often staying up late to help me with assignments or offering to proofread important emails to professors. "You're like the big sister I never had," I told her one night after she'd helped me study for a particularly difficult chemistry exam. Madison smiled warmly. "That's what family does for each other. We look out for each other." The first sign that something might be wrong came in the spring semester when I tried to check my credit score for a personal finance class assignment. The credit monitoring website kept giving me error messages, claiming there was suspicious activity associated with my social security number. When I called the customer service line, the representative seemed confused by my inquiry. "Ma'am, it shows here that you've already got active monitoring services with 2 other companies," she told me. "You can't set up duplicate accounts with the same social security number." "That's impossible," I said. "I've never used credit monitoring before." "According to our records, you opened your first account in September of last year. Would you like me to transfer you to our fraud department?" I hung up feeling confused and slightly panicked. September was when I'd started college, but I definitely hadn't opened any credit monitoring accounts. When I mentioned the strange phone call to Madison, her reaction seemed oddly reassuring rather than concerned. "Oh, that happens all the time with college students," she said dismissively. "The financial aid office probably signed you up for something automatically. You know how they are about protecting students from identity theft. I wouldn't worry about it." Her explanation made sense, and I was grateful to have a roommate who understood these systems better than I did. Madison had been dealing with college bureaucracy longer than me, so if she wasn't worried, then I probably shouldn't be either. But the credit monitoring incident was just the beginning. A few weeks later, I received a letter from a credit card company thanking me for my recent application and informing me that my card would arrive within 7 to 10 business days. I hadn't applied for any credit cards. When I showed the letter to Madison, she frowned thoughtfully and suggested it might be a marketing scam. Companies do this all the time, she said. They send fake approval letters to try to trick people into thinking they've been pre-approved. Just throw it away. If you didn't apply for it, it's definitely a scam. Again, her explanation seemed reasonable. Madison was more worldly than me, and she'd warned me several times about various scams that targeted college students. I trusted her judgment completely, but the letters kept coming. Over the next few months, I received credit card welcome packets from 3 different companies, loan approval notifications from online lenders I'd never heard of, and even a collections notice for a medical bill I definitely hadn't incurred. Each time I brought these mysterious letters to Madison, she had explanations that sounded plausible: marketing scams, clerical errors, or mix-ups with someone who had a similar name. Identity mix-ups happen more than you'd think, she assured me, especially with common names like yours. There's probably some other Emma Johnson out there applying for credit cards and not updating her address properly. Madison's calm responses to what seemed like increasingly serious problems kept me from panicking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The turning point came when I tried to apply for a student credit card that was specifically marketed to college students with no credit history. The application was rejected immediately, with a notice that I should contact the credit bureau for more information about my existing credit obligations. Existing credit obligations? I never had a credit card, a loan, or any form of debt beyond my federal student loans. This time, instead of asking Madison for advice, I decided to investigate on my own, and I went to the campus financial aid office and asked them to help me request a copy of my credit report. The financial aid counselor was happy to help, though she seemed surprised by my request. Most freshmen don't have enough credit history to worry about monitoring yet, she said as she helped me fill out the paperwork. Are you planning to apply for additional private loans? I just want to make sure everything's accurate, I said, not wanting to admit that I was confused about my own financial situation. When my credit report arrived a week later, I felt like I was looking at someone else's life. According to the 3 major credit bureaus, I had 5 active credit cards with a combined limit of over $20,000. I had taken out 2 personal loans totaling $8,500. I had even co-signed for an auto loan on a car I'd never seen. Most shocking of all, several of these accounts were already in default, with missed payments dating back months. My credit score, which should have been non-existent as a college freshman with no credit history, was 487, deep in the poor range due to multiple late payments, high utilization, and defaulted accounts. I stared at the credit report in my dorm room, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Every single account had been opened with my correct social security number, date of birth, and personal information. The addresses listed were a mix of my home address in Iowa and my college dorm, but I had never applied for any of these accounts, never received any of the actual credit cards or loan funds, and never made any purchases or payments. Someone had been systematically opening accounts in my name for months, using my credit while ensuring I never saw the actual cards or account statements. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone close to me had to be responsible for this. Only a few people had access to my personal information: my parents, my high school guidance counselor who'd helped with college applications, and Madison, who'd helped me with various financial aid and campus paperwork. With growing dread, I started to think about all the times Madison had helped me with forms, all the personal information she'd had access to, and all the reasonable explanations she'd provided for the suspicious mail I'd been receiving. That night, while Madison was at her study group, I searched our dorm room. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Hidden in a folder in Madison's desk drawer were copies of documents I'd never seen before, credit card applications filled out in my name but with Madison's handwriting, loan agreements with forged versions of my signature, and even a notebook with my personal information written out in detail: social security number, mother's maiden name, childhood addresses, and answers to common security questions. The notebook also contained what appeared to be a timeline of Madison's scheme, with notes about which accounts to open when, which credit limits to request, and even strategies for intercepting mail before I could see it. Most damning of all were copies of several actual credit cards in my name, cards I'd never received because Madison had been intercepting the mail and redirecting statements to a PO box she'd apparently opened for this purpose. At the bottom of the folder was a printed email from Madison to someone whose name I didn't recognize. The roommate situation is working perfectly. She's completely trusting and hasn't caught on to anything yet. I should be able to max out the remaining cards before the semester ends. I sat on the floor of our dorm room, surrounded by evidence that my trusted roommate had been systematically destroying my financial future while pretending to care about my success. The betrayal was so complete and calculated that I felt physically sick. Madison had befriended me, helped me navigate college life, and positioned herself as someone I could trust completely, all while using that trust to steal my identity and ruin my credit before I was even old enough to understand what credit meant. When Madison returned from her study group that evening, she found me sitting at my desk with all the evidence spread out in front of me. Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally, defiance. "You went through my personal belongings," she said, as if I was the one who had violated trust. "You stole my identity," I replied, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. Madison's response was immediate and manipulative. "You don't understand how expensive college is for some of us. My family doesn't have money like yours does. I was just trying to survive." By destroying my credit? By opening accounts in my name? "You weren't even using your credit," she said, as if that justified the theft. "You're 18 years old with rich parents who pay for everything. You don't need perfect credit right now." The casual cruelty of her logic was breathtaking. She'd convinced herself that stealing my financial future was acceptable because I came from a middle-class family and she didn't. "And what was your plan when I graduated and tried to buy a car or rent an apartment?" I asked. Madison shrugged. "You would have figured it out eventually. Rich kids always do." Her assumption that my family's modest middle-class income made me wealthy enough to absorb the financial damage revealed how little she'd actually cared about me as a person. "Plus," she continued, "you learned a lot about financial responsibility from me. Consider it an education." The conversation ended when I told Madison I was calling campus security and reporting the identity theft to local police. Her response was to grab her purse and leave, claiming I was overreacting and that no real harm had been done. She didn't return to our dorm room that night, and the next morning I found a note saying she was withdrawing from school due to a family emergency. Madison had disappeared, leaving me to deal with the financial chaos she created while avoiding any consequences for her actions. The process of recovering from Madison's identity theft took over 2 years and involved more bureaucracy than I'd encountered in my entire life up to that point. I had to file police reports, dispute fraudulent accounts with multiple credit bureaus, contact every company that had issued credit in my name, and work with the college's financial aid office to ensure my legitimate student loans weren't affected by the fraud. Most challenging was proving that I hadn't been complicit in the identity theft. Because Madison had been so careful to use accurate personal information, and because we'd lived together, some investigators initially suspected I might have been involved in the scheme. It took months of providing alibis, witness statements, and evidence of Madison's deception before I was fully cleared of any wrongdoing. The financial impact was significant, but not insurmountable. The fraudulent debts were eventually removed from my credit report, Though the process of disputing each account was time-consuming and stressful, more difficult was the emotional impact of realizing that someone I'd trusted completely had been systematically betraying me for months while pretending to care about my well-being. Madison had known details about my family, my fears about college, my academic struggles, and my financial concerns, and she'd used all of that information to better manipulate and deceive me. During the investigation, I learned that I wasn't Madison's first victim. Campus police discovered that she'd been running similar identity theft schemes at her previous college, which explained why she'd transferred to our school and why she'd been so knowledgeable about college financial systems. Madison had developed a pattern of targeting trusting freshmen from middle-class families, positioning herself as a helpful older student, and then systematically stealing their identities over the course of an academic year. She would typically disappear before the scheme was discovered, transferring to a new school and starting the process over with new victims. The police estimated that Madison had stolen the identities of at least 6 students over 3 years, accumulating tens of thousands of dollars in fraudulent debt across multiple states. She was eventually arrested at another college, where she'd been attempting the same scheme, though by then the statute of limitations had expired on some of her earlier crimes. Madison was charged with multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, and forgery across several states. She accepted a plea bargain that included 2 years in prison and full restitution to her victims, though the restitution was largely symbolic since she'd already spent most of the stolen money. During her sentencing hearing, Madison's attorney claimed she'd been driven to crime by financial desperation and family poverty. The prosecutor countered by pointing out that Madison had been receiving financial aid and work-study opportunities that would have covered her college expenses legitimately, but she'd chosen theft because it provided money for luxury items and entertainment rather than basic necessities. In my victim impact statement, I wrote that Madison had taught me the difference between someone who needs help and someone who chooses to take advantage of others. Financial struggles don't justify destroying another person's future, I wrote. Madison had every opportunity to ask for help, to apply for additional aid, or to work harder to support herself. Instead, she chose to steal from the very people who trusted and cared about her. I also pointed out that Madison's victims were all students who were also struggling financially, making her choice to target fellow college students particularly cruel. Today, 5 years after Madison's identity theft scheme, I've fully recovered financially and graduated with my degree in business administration. The experience taught me valuable lessons about financial security, identity protection, and the importance of monitoring my own accounts. I now work for a nonprofit organization that provides financial literacy education to college students, with a focus on identity theft prevention and early detection. Madison's betrayal also taught me to be more cautious about sharing personal information, even with people I trust. I've learned to verify financial information independently rather than relying on others' explanations for suspicious activity. Most importantly, I've learned that genuine helpfulness and manipulative grooming can look very similar on the surface. The difference is that people who genuinely want to help you will encourage you to understand and control your own financial situation, while manipulators will encourage you to rely on their expertise and explanations. Madison never contacted me after her release from prison, though I occasionally receive updates from law enforcement about her activities. She was arrested again 2 years ago for a similar identity theft scheme in another state, suggesting she never learned that there are legitimate ways to solve financial problems. When I tell my story to college students today, the most common response is shock that someone would target their own roommate for identity theft. But that's exactly what makes the crime so effective. The people closest to us are often in the best position to steal our identities because they have access to our personal information and our trust. Madison taught me that the most dangerous predators are often the ones who position themselves as protectors, and that the best defense against identity theft is understanding your own financial situation well enough to recognize when something doesn't belong. The roommate I trusted with everything turned out to be someone who saw my trust as an opportunity rather than a responsibility. But her betrayal also taught me to value the people in my life who genuinely deserve that trust and to protect myself from those who don't.